Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of On the Homefront. You can see we're in a packed studio today. We're with people involved with the Windham Theater Guild. Pride and Prejudice opens this weekend. We're going to talk about that. Also, we're going to talk about the arts with an update from the Cultural Coalition, serving southeastern and northeastern Connecticut with Baird. She comes on usually once a month or so with an update covering the whole southeast region. And we're going to close out today with an update from the Connecticut Tenants Union. They've been very busy now for the last year and a half, helping tenants organize around the state. And we have Luke coming back for an update as well to close the show. So right now we're going to look at the Windham Theater Guild. Pride and Prejudice is opening this weekend. So congratulations first on another new show. Hope it's a good run. It's running now. There'll be many performances we'll talk about. Sitting next to me is the director, Karyn Eves. Next to her, we also have Alexis Viola, and we have David Cespedes. So they're part of the cast for the show. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you for having us.
So maybe, Karyn, you could perhaps set the stage for a story that we know and love very well. How did you block it out or decide to stage it, to connect it for today, when this is a classic story that goes back quite a ways?
Yeah, it sure does. It's a very old rom-com. And in general, you know, you've got kind of the usual cast of characters. You have the Regency clothing that flatters no one. All those pieces are in place. But the story itself truly is timeless, and I think that is the piece that makes it easier to bring it forward that 200-something years. So the version that we've selected is actually already has a little bit of a modern twist on it anyway.
Okay.
So the script itself was modernized, emphasizing matchmaking and the idea of it being adversarial in the marriage market of the Regency era. And so we picked that script for starters, and then from there we also we're a little bit looser in the ways in which we move and interact throughout the show. It's a little louder and perhaps a little more risque than the traditional Austen. So.
I think we're ready for risque these days.
Yeah, I think so.
Within the bounds of good taste, that's very good. So the setting, is it an urban setting, a suburbanite kind of thing? Where do you place this drama?
It is definitely still in Regency England.
Okay.
We've got places like Hertfordshire and Pemberley and Derbyshire. All those places are there, and they are in Regency costumes. But I think that's the piece that puts it in the time and place, and then the dialogue and the interactions, the way in which the characters speak to each other in particular, brings it forward a little bit more. Yeah.
So this is opening February 7th. Performances are going all the way through the 22nd at different times, 7:30, a couple of matinees. If you go to windhamtheaterguild.org is the website with all the dates and information to get tickets. And two of our cast members are here. We have Jane Bennet in the house and Mr. Collins. So how did you decide to incarnate these creatures? And also I want to congratulate David. This is your first full theater show, so welcome aboard. I won't say break a leg. That's tasteless, but I'll say enjoy yourself. Have a great moment. There you go.
Yeah, it's really exciting, especially because I got into the theater community so late in my life, but, better late than never. And so it's been a very fun experience doing all these different kind of shows, and to do like this professional one for the first time is definitely an experience.
Right. Because, one thing you mentioned to me before we were on the air is that you got the bug in high school. And it's an example where the arts in high school can really start something, right? It did for you. It got you going.
Yes. And I really have to thank my teacher at that course, who was also my English teacher, funny enough, and just kind of putting me on the course of wanting to do stuff in theater or like writing and directing in film or television and all that. And so I wouldn't really be here if it wasn't for that class, and I owe a lot to that.
Yeah. Now, Alexis, you've done a few. How are you working with Jane in the storyline and trying to portray her range of emotions and judgments?
She is quite an uptight, proper lady. So it's a lot of holding back, I think, for me, because I often have characters of the opposite makeup. So this has been an interesting one for sure.
So now when it comes to the thing about directors that I like is that they have to figure out blocking and lighting. And you're, of course, like a heavy tech background.
Yes.
So when you try to portray the space, what kind of music are you using? What kind of lighting to kind of give them an environment to do their thing?
Oh, I don't want to spoil too much.
Okay.
But we play around a little bit with your environment. So again, set is very much the interior of these grand houses in England. But we have dance sequences. We also we have choreographed dance sequences.
All right.
And so there's those pieces that kind of immerse you in it. But we're playing around a little bit with the speakers. So depending on where you are in the audience and what action you should be imagining happening around you, the sound is coming from different areas. The lighting is also going to be doing some similar tricks. So yeah.
All right. Be prepared.
Yeah.
Now, you've been with the Guild now for quite a few years now, since the aughts, 7 or so. Have you noticed in recent years any changes in your audience or the kind of energy you're getting? Certainly people are kind of getting over the COVID shutdown. That was a few years ago, so that was dark for everybody. But how is the vibe today in theater? What are you seeing in the region?
I think theater in general is still struggling a little bit. I mean, we're blossoming in the sense that there's so many options out there, but struggling still in the sense that it's hard to appeal to a wide enough audience. I mean, it's a double-edged sword there. So it's great that we have all these wonderful theaters in the area, but it does mean that there's a show every weekend, if you're willing to travel within about an hour.
Yeah.
And so for the Theater Guild, we've tried to keep up with the times. That's why we are doing Kate Hamill's version of Pride and Prejudice instead of the Baker adaptation, which is a little bit more traditional. We want to pick shows and runs that appeal to a very wide array. So we have, kind of a tradition going now. Are we on 5 years with Rocky?
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. So, we've got the Rocky Horror Show, which has a much younger crowd.
Sure.
But we're also setting Shakespeare, for our next one. So, in the course of a single season, we're really trying to hit all of those different demographics, find something for everyone. We always want to throw in at least one drama, something with a nice light rom-com. That's us this time. So it's definitely about trying to continue to appeal to the audience and get them excited about the plays. And there's something about live theater that I think not enough people know and have yet experienced. And so I think that's the other thing is we're always trying to get more new folks in. And this production, I think we have 4, maybe 5 of the cast who have never worked with the Windham Theater Guild before.
Awesome.
And are coming in, and a majority of my cast is traveling over half an hour to be in the show. So absolutely trying to bring in new blood and appeal and make
it's a different
happy.
Kind of energy.
It is, yeah.
It's kind of like in a way in the 50s when TV came along, people were not going to theaters as much. They were at home watching this new box with pictures. And the idea is, well, what is it about a live space that's different than watching a movie in 2 dimensions, right? And when you're in an audience like a musician, it's the room. The people in the room and the size of the room, that makes the space, and the music is there. For you, it's the audience energy, right?
Absolutely.
That keeps you back. Can you talk about how to verbalize that? There's no word for it that I know of yet. I'm trying myself. But that energy between an audience in the room and the actors.
I mean, I would just say it's magical. I think it's magical on both ends.
It's always like a new experience. There was like a quote from Stephen Sondheim where he mentioned the difference between like a movie and a theater performance, where like a movie is like forever. You capture that on film, and that's never going to change no matter how much time passes. Right. Whereas with a theater show, it's never the same thing every night. Even if it's like the same cast the next night, it's always going to be like a different style of performance. And then even if a show you've seen before, it's going to be like new director, new cast, new tech crew and all that. So no matter what, it's always going to be a new, fresh experience when you go to the theater and see a live show.
And even this show, over the course of its run, I have not seen the same show twice watching you guys on the theater, on the stage. And getting an audience in is going to change that even more.
Sure.
But this show especially, it really leans into the idea of the chaos and the high stakes that it is to try and marry off, 4 young gals. And so we have actors and actresses coming and going off the stage. We have things happening on one side while you're supposed to be paying attention to the other side. You're going to see something different every single time.
Yeah.
For all, I think we've got like 10 shows.
Right.
And you're going to see something different every time. Yeah.
And that's kind of the director's chair, because you kind of orchestrate this thing and then you see how it goes, and there's no two alike. So every night it's like a brand new thing the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, I want to mention the website again, windhamtheaterguild.org. The shows begin on the 7th, this Friday, and they go through the 22nd. Usually at 7:30. There's a matinee on the 16th at 2 p.m. I wish you a great run. And also, we'll have you folks back for the 12th night. That's going to be, I guess, March, April, is it?
I think so, yeah.
All right. Yeah. So, congratulations on your work. Good luck on your first time out there in the big pool in the deep end. I wish you well.
Especially with this character.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can stop by during the Chocolate Festival this weekend as well. We have an open house from 10 to 2.
Yeah.
And we actually will have some cast on hand in character. So you can come have tea with the characters at Pemberley. And if you stop by and take a photo, post to social media, and tag Windham Theater Guild, you are entered to win 2 free tickets to the show that night.
Hey, you trade some proper insults along the way, of course.
Absolutely.
You have to shake those British sensibilities whenever you can.
Indeed.
So anyway, the Chocolate Fest is on the 8th. It starts at 10 o'clock. It's all over Main Street, Willimantic, so you can check that out as well. So I wish you a great evening, Karyn. Thanks so much for everything.
Thank you so much for having us.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So we're going to take a short break and come back and talk about the Cultural Coalition. Stay with us. Lots of good events to go on. I'm going to run down some of these. Then we're going to talk about the Connecticut Tenants Union in a few minutes. We're going to have Luke in for an update. But I want to mention the email. If you'd like to be a guest in the studio, if you have some news to share, or if you want to bring in a few people to talk about an issue of concern, the studio doors are open to you. Just use john@humanartsmedia.com, and we can arrange a time here. Every Wednesday, we're live at 5 o'clock here in Willimantic at WILI. Our programs are recorded for YouTube, so you might be watching us now on the WILI Radio YouTube channel. We're also on sister station WICH in Norwich that covers Norwich and New London, and we're also on WECS in Willimantic, so we're trying to reach you in different areas of the state. I also want to mention Neighbors, a wonderful monthly publication. They come out throughout the year as a local resource. We connect to them with guests and information. It's a free newspaper that's available widely. Many of the guests that we have on the show, the information they share with us is in Neighbors as well. You can go to neighborspaper.com and connect to that great community resource. Okay, this weekend's got some good things coming up. If you're a jazz fan, I want to mention the Thread City Jazz Trio with Anthony Cornicello, Rick O'Neill, and Matt Bronson. They're doing a performance this Friday, the 7th, at 7:30. They're celebrating the release of their second CD, and that's going to be in the lobby of the Fine Arts Instructional Center, a great concert hall. They have a nice big lobby with a high ceiling and nice acoustics. They're playing there at 7:30 this Friday. It's a free concert. And if you're in the area locally, they're having a student jazz jam tonight, Wednesday the 5th, from 7 to 9 in the lobby, the same performance space. So if you're a jazz head, you're going to hear some really good jazz tonight for free at the FAIC lobby. I also want to mention, too, the 19th Annual Romantic Willimantic Chocolate Festival, February 8th, beginning at 10 a.m. all over Main Street, Willimantic. If you go to the website, willimanticstreetfest.com, you'll find out all the events going on. They also have a Facebook page, but it's been here for 19 years. It's a wonderful way to celebrate our town, get lots of chocolate, and see what's going on in all the stores. It's a real hoot. Very family-friendly day on Saturday the 8th. Also on the 14th, Quiet Corner Sings is going on at the Vanilla Bean up in the Pomfret area. This is a group of people that get together. They have a bunch of musicians that take over the restaurant. They have a guitar player, 2 piano players, solo singers, and they're all playing requests, playing classic American songs from the American Songbook. It's a real thing where they encourage you to sing along and play together at the Vanilla Bean. They've been doing it now for many months, and they're building an audience for it now. People are having a good time. The whole idea of a community sing out loud together. So that's Quiet Corner Sings. The next one will be at the Vanilla Bean on February 14th at 7 o'clock. Okay. Want to mention, too, Taste of Towns is still going on. We talked about that on our program last week. Some of the other shows here at WILI focused on that as well. The town of Mansfield and Willimantic have many restaurants coordinating with special menus throughout this period, and it runs until February 9th. If you haven't done so yet, stop by one of the restaurants and support our local economy. The website has all the information, all the menus, and everything to make a choice. Taste, the number 2towns.com. Taste2towns.com. Got to mention a couple more things. The Breadbox Theater, they have an event coming up Sunday, February 23rd. Lara Herskovich and the Highway Philosophers and Seat of Our Pants, 4 p.m. on Sunday, February 23rd in the sanctuary at St. Paul's. And that is all to benefit the Breadbox series, helping out the Soup Kitchen. The day before, February 22nd, Hugh Blumenfeld is going to be at Willimantic Records from 2 to 4 with some other music friends raising money for the No Freeze Project. So that's a good weekend to jot down, the 22nd from 2 to 4 with Hugh Blumenfeld at Willimantic Records. That's a couple blocks away from here at the Bliss Marketplace on North Street. And then the next day on February 23rd, 4 o'clock, music for the Breadbox. If you're into movies, people in the Moulton Art Gallery are at it again. You know, Phoebe and friends put together this great art space, 31 Moulton Court. They do special events all throughout the year. Last month, they began a film series with Ivan the Terrible. For February, A Man Escaped. For March, Rashomon, an awesome film from Akira Kurosawa, a master Japanese director, Rashomon. Central Station from Brazil, The Secret Garden, and Apocalypse Now. It's going to be in June. So anyway, this is going to be at the Moulton Court Gallery, 31 Moulton Court. It's the 4th Wednesday movie series. We'll have Phoebe on soon about that. A couple more things while we have some time today. I got news from the Connecticut Office of the Arts. They're taking nominations right now for the Connecticut State Poet Laureate and the Connecticut State Troubadour. And if you know people that are worthy of this recognition in our region, they want to hear from you now until March 15th. You can go to the Office of the Arts website and make your nominations. If you want to think about somebody as a poet laureate, they serve a 3-year term from July of this year for 3 years. They must be a Connecticut resident during the term. They must present up to 3 public events annually as requested, and they must participate in poetry experiences throughout the state. But it's a wonderful opportunity to share the word in different forms. The poet laureate nominations are through March 15th. So think about all the writers you know that do good work. This might be a chance for them. And also for people that want to do music, the State Troubadour, again, a 3-year term from 25 to 28. You must be a Connecticut resident. You have to do 3 public events, once a year with the Connecticut Office of the Arts. And you have to participate in music events throughout the experience, which I'm sure you're doing now if somebody's thinking of nominating you as the Troubadour. So these are ways for people from our region here in the eastern half to get nominated and recognized. So go to the Office of the Arts, and we'll talk about that. The last thing I want to do is mention Joe Malinowski and Willimantic Records again. Joe is one of our designated arts heroes from the Office of the Arts. Also, Casey Moran from New London. These folks were recognized for their good work for the arts community, and they're going to have a special celebration in Hartford in April. So sometime in March, I'm going to have both Casey and Joe here to talk about their work for the community and how people all across the state are doing really good things to keep the arts alive. Okay, so that's our news for right now. What we're going to do is Luke's going to be here in a few moments from the Connecticut Tenants Union. I've got a short music break planned for you, and then we'll come right back. A classic tune from the 60s, an old 45 that they resurrected. It's Willimantic, USA. Enjoy.
Take a look at the map of United States and you'll find Connecticut.
Take a look at the map of Connecticut and you'll see the place of my birth.
It's the grandest place on earth. Willimantic, Willimantic, my hometown. There's a good main street where good neighbors meet. Miles of smiles keep chasing you around. You'll be living life's worth living once you're to live and die. I love the hills of my Connecticut. I love its valleys and its streams. I've got my loved ones in Connecticut, and they're always in my dreams. My heart is home among those friendly hills, and no matter where I roam, I love the hills of my Connecticut, Connecticut, my own. My heart is home among those friendly hills, and no matter where I roam, I love the hills of my Connecticut, Connecticut, my own.
All righty, the hills of my Connecticut and Willimantic, USA. Some of the best time fillers I've ever used on radio, folks. Hope you're enjoying the show on the Homefront. We're here every week on WILI. You know, the station recently doubled its daytime hours. Now we're on the air from 4 to 6, Monday through Friday. We've got Wayno every weekday in the morning. And they're considering now trying to add possibly a third hour a day from 3 to 6. They're not quite sure yet how soon. But the idea is they're trying to do more local radio. All of our shows are trying to reach out to you to give you a chance to communicate. Our local newspapers are really struggling. If you follow them, you know how tight it is for them. They don't have the reporting staff they used to, so a lot of news is just not getting out. So people are going to have to do kind of more for themselves, and that's what we're trying to do here in a small way, is to use our radio stations and YouTube to help people get on the air, share their stories, get a link, and then if you're here, you get a link and you can share your story in your own media. That's the whole idea. Next week's program is busy again. We're going to have the second part of a series about tax filing. Volunteers, the VITA program is going to have a chance for you to get free help from people who've been trained to help you fill out your tax returns now that they're due by April 15th. You're going to find out about that program and where you can go locally for free tax assistance. We're also going to have people here talking about some special Willie Brew and downtown Willimantic events coming up in March. And we're also going to have Phoebe here from the Moulton Art Gallery about their film series. And there might be a fourth guest as well. We're still talking about that. We're going to have Veterans for Peace here on February 19th with musician Curtis Brand, and we're going to air the last speech from President Eisenhower, a speech that was aired recently, a very historic speech from 1960. Our president, the former military commander of World War II, warning us about the invention and power of what he called the military-industrial complex, and that was in 1960, something that didn't exist here before World War II, something that's bigger than it's ever been since 1960. So we'll talk about weapons and peace on the 19th. Also, the Know Your Farmer Fair will come up on the 26th, and Karyn Warinsky will be back with her Poets at Large series looking at local poetry. So we're looking for guests. We're planning all the way into March. If you'd like to be on the show, don't be shy. Just use john@humanartsmedia.com as the email, and we'll arrange to have you right here in the house. Okay, something else that we're covering is the Windham United to Save Our Healthcare Coalition. They're usually here once a month. There have been some hearings going on right now. There's a whole process going on to do a research study of the feasibility for a birthing center or to reopen the birthing unit at Windham Hospital. There's a review process underway that we've covered quite a bit now for the last few years. So they're having local meetings now to get community input. Probably by the end of this month or early March, we'll have the coalition back with an update to find out what's happening with that process and that report. So we'll keep following the healthcare changes here. We're going to have Luke here in a few minutes from the Connecticut Tenants Union. And then one more thing we're doing is looking at live music in the area. We have many venues. They're still struggling to bounce back from COVID, but we've had Strange Brew from the Norwich area, the Stomping Ground from the Putnam area, the Packing House from Willington. And here in Willimantic, there's a new place opening on Main Street, very close to our studios, next to where Spiral Arts is. I think it's called the River Room. It's opening at some point soon. It's going to be another new place for live music in downtown Willimantic, and people are very excited about that. So one thing that we're going to do from now through spring is go to the venues as they get into spring, what's happening with live music, and how can you connect to these events and support the arts economy. So that's some of the things that we're going to be looking at here on the show besides everyday events. Okay, well, I just want to mention again that the shows that are here, this is Luke right now. Let's see what's happening. Luke is here. This is live radio. We can talk. Huh. All righty. Well, I'll tell you what we'll do. We have plenty of time left. I got some more information to share. Let's take a break for a couple of short messages, and we'll come right back with Luke, and we'll talk about the Connecticut Tenants Union. Stay with us. All righty. We're back live on the Homefront, folks. You see I've got my headphones on because we're going to have our phone call today with Luke from the Connecticut Tenants Union. Sometimes Luke's in the studio with us, but today we're going to have Luke on the phone. It's Luke. His name is Luke Melonakos-Harrison. He's the vice president of the union. Thank you very much for joining us today to share an update on your good work, Luke.
Happy to be here, John. Thanks.
Now, I know it's been a couple of months since our last update, and there's a lot happening, and I wanted you to just give us an update and maybe give us an idea of some of the ideas coming up in the new legislative session that people might look out for. There's a lot of talk about some of the laws to protect tenants' rights, and you're working very hard in that area.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's been a busy winter for us, for sure. We got some organizing in new parts of the state. There was a particular saga that went down in the city of Hartford involving 50 households that were displaced from their apartment building by an electrical fire.
Wow.
That the fire itself damaged part of the building, but a bunch of other units were damaged through the impacts that the fire damage had on the rest of the building,
sure.
Structural issues that were sort of uncovered. And then that was followed by a mass burglary of the units once tenants were moved out, and it seemed to have been a lock key burglary, so people who had access to the building just tore the place up and, stole tens of thousands of dollars of people's property, and it was just really devastating. And so, but there had been a union in the building. And so, instead of everybody sort of being on their own, scattered to the wind after this really devastating tragedy, they stuck together and pushed both the city of Hartford, who sort of became the temporary landlord, if you will,
right,
for the temporary housing accommodations while they were displaced, as well as the Gray Hill Group, which was the owners of the building based out of New York City, kind of a big corporate investment firm type entity, to push Gray Hill to repair the building and or move people into comparable units at the same rents that they were paying before, and then to push the city of Hartford to really do what they're supposed to do under state law when tenants are displaced by city order. So that whole saga was very demanding. It was really tough working with both the city and the landlord, kind of fighting on two fronts.
Oh, yeah.
And it was in the middle of winter when people were just facing an enormous amount of anxiety about having lost their homes and not knowing whether they were going to be able to move back in.
Oh, yeah.
And, struggling to find any alternative housing. So it was a really tough one, but I'm happy and pleased to say that by early January, after putting a lot of pressure on the landlord, a lot of different ways, including actually taking a trip to New York City, we got a van and went down to their office, and it was pouring rain that day, and we picketed outside their office, and that seemed to be the thing that helped move the needle, because by the end of December, early January, they were finally moving people into other units of theirs in the non-damaged side of the building and in their other buildings at the same rents that they were paying, and in several cases for longer-term leases, 2-year leases, so that people don't have to worry about a rent increase next year.
Right. They could be stable and get over the crisis, and they had the properties there all along. The space was always there anyway.
Exactly. So it took months of fighting, but at the end of the day, everybody was able to move into a place and at a rent that they could afford. So it was a really, really tough fight, very devastating impacts on people, but we're, happy that the union was able to stick together through that whole thing and get everybody into a safe place. So that was a very demanding but ultimately rewarding fight that we're sort of just coming out of.
Yeah, well, that's a bravo to you. And I want to mention the website, folks, if you want more information about these stories, is cttenantsunion.org. And if you could, Luke, just take a second. You mentioned the Gray Hill Group. Something that people are still learning about is this whole wave of national economic activity where venture and hedge funds are buying massive amounts of properties as investments. And all of a sudden, you have a company 1,000 miles away with hundreds of units, and they're just managing them as if they're part of a portfolio. Can you talk about how that practice is really affecting tenants' rights?
Yeah, you just described it really well, John. That's what we see all the time. It's the days of having a personal relationship with your landlord. It's becoming increasingly rare for tenants in this decade, in this era. You know, so many of us are dealing with sort of faceless, nameless property management companies that are, fronts for exactly what you described, investment firms with huge amounts of capital being traded, and the tenants who are paying the money into that whole investment system are really just numbers on a spreadsheet. They're not people who are trying to have a life and have stability and put down roots in one place for the long haul. And so some of the impacts on tenants are just massive fluctuations in rent. The Gray Hill Group is a perfect example. They bought this building in Hartford that was, it's sort of mid-tier in terms of the quality. It's definitely got some issues, but it's not falling apart. It's not necessarily, pest-ridden like some other apartment buildings, right? But the rents were as low as $850 and $950, $1,000, the kind of rents that people can still modestly afford on a lower income or on a disability or retirement income.
Right.
And we think that Gray Hill bought this building banking on being able to raise the rents dramatically over the next few years, and we think that's why they didn't want to repair the damaged units from the fire, so that the old tenants with the old rents would be able to move back in.
Right.
It seems like they were delaying those repairs so that the older tenants with the older rents would be forced to scatter, then they could do a renovation and really jack up the rent.
Sure.
So,
sure.
That was another aspect of this most recent fight. But more broadly speaking, it's just there's no consideration for the impact on the tenant for what that rent increase is going to mean for a lot of these corporate landlord companies. And it's really fueling instability and displacement in a lot of communities.
And something else you mentioned a few months ago is the idea of no-fault evictions. People can just suddenly be evicted without having been a bad tenant. Maybe they even paid their rent on time, but they're still being evicted. Is that coming up in the session now? Are there things that you're hopeful about that people can try to follow on their own?
Yeah, that's a big one, and I am, again, happy to say that I do think we've been able to build a lot of momentum in the legislature. It's not a done deal by any means. There's some opposition that we need to overcome, but from this year compared to last year, I do think that we've built some momentum, changed some minds, educated a lot of legislators about how no-fault evictions are really used in practice. And why? So the policy that we're proposing is just cause eviction protection, requiring there to be a just cause, a justification for any eviction, and that will, protect tenants from this kind of the abuses of power, where a landlord can simply issue an eviction, maybe because it's for a discriminatory purpose,
right,
a retaliatory purpose. Or often it's these corporate investment firms that we were just talking about bake it into their business plan, just mass clear-outs of existing tenants using no-fault evictions in order to dramatically raise rents. It's kind of baked into the financial calculations when they're buying a property, and that's just having a very devastating effect on Connecticut. So we're hoping to get Just Cause done this session. We're actually expecting the public hearing for it. Could be as soon as next week, probably the week after. And it'll be on either a Tuesday or a Thursday. That's when the Housing Committee meets. So if folks have personal experiences or who are just supportive of the issue, want to share their story and have their voice heard by the Connecticut legislature, the opportunity for that is coming up very soon.
Okay, so once again, I want to mention Luke's website, cttenantsunion.org. Now, this is growing across the state. You've talked about stories that were in, for example, New Haven. Are there any other news of other activities or some areas in the state that are newly active where people are beginning to take action on their own?
Yeah. I'm actually, right after this interview, I'm going to one of our tenant unions in Newington, outside of Hartford.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a union that's been in a real process of back and forth with their landlord company in Bloomfield that I've been closely involved with. That's north of Hartford.
Right.
And there's increasing activity both in the southeast part of the state, kind of the greater New London area,
Mm-hmm.
as well as down in the Stamford area, which are very different parts of the state, but both are seeing increased inquiries from tenants in those areas who are seeking to unionize.
Right.
And I think it's the pressure of the upward pressure of rent. It just really is taking its toll on people, and people are looking for resources because there's just no tools. There's just not enough tools available for people to use to stay in their home, and they're increasingly feeling the need to kind of take matters into their own hands and unionize.
Do you have a sense sometimes when you talk to people that they still don't really know their basic rights when they're confronted with something basic like a landlord letter that surprises them, that they still don't know enough about their own basic rights and they're flying blind, or are folks getting more aware today?
I think folks are getting more aware, but I do think that the education on tenant rights is definitely lacking. I was just talking about our just eviction protection policy,
right.
And one outcome of that campaign, even though we didn't get the bill passed last session, was that a lot of people who actually are currently protected by just cause because they're over 62 or they have a disability and they're in a larger building,
right,
learned for the first time that they had that protection. There were a lot of tenants who were protected but didn't know it. And as a result of all the discussion about just cause in the news, learned that they had that protection. So I think, the more that tenants are unionizing and are telling their stories and sort of getting organized and getting active, that is helping increase people's awareness of their rights. But, the sort of fundamental characteristic of the tenant-landlord relationship is that typically landlords have attorneys and tenants don't.
Yeah.
So, landlords are getting detailed advice on all the different ways that they can use the law in their favor, and tenants almost never are. So it takes a lot of self-educating, which, as you can imagine, is less accessible for many people than just getting it straight from a lawyer.
Right. So here's a question from the viewpoint of not the corporate landlords that are investing in the companies like Gray Hill you mentioned, but maybe small landlords. They may live in one property, they have a few properties, but they're not really huge. And they were hit by COVID because of the shutdown, and a lot of people had their rents dropped, or they were put in forbearance for a long time, and they were available to avoid making rental payments. But the landlords themselves still had to deal with maintenance and other issues financially, and some of them say they weren't given the same breaks that the tenants were during the crisis. Do you have any sense of how some landlords also suffered, and they're also struggling because the tenants, for good reason, couldn't pay the rent, but that had consequences for the property owner that they didn't plan on without anybody being at fault?
Yeah. I think one thing that's important to remember is that at that time, the state released a bunch of resources in the form of the Unite CT Rental Assistance Program,
okay,
which was intended to keep the money flowing, essentially, into the bank account, the landlord's bank account, even while recognizing that so many tenants were losing their income.
Oh, great. Okay.
So that was put in place, and there was also I'm forgetting the acronym now, but during COVID, the sort of like small business protection, not loans, because it was not required to be paid back, but there was another sort of surge of money to keep small businesses. A lot of landlords also benefited from.
Good.
In our research, we were looking up, who got some of those resources. So while I can understand that argument, I also know that there was public money being funneled into the housing market to avoid, landlords feeling the financial loss, even though, of course, tenants felt enormous financial loss from
Indeed.
losing their job. And
yeah.
in many cases, facing eviction and losing their housing.
Right. They didn't have any deep pockets from prior investments or success. But it's a good perspective to share to balance out all the concerns people had on the big equation. But, Luke, one last question for you. If people visit your website, what could they learn from that to stay in touch with you in between our reports? Because, as you know, this is growing all over the state. And as people move forward, they might need your help one day. So what's on the website that could help people?
Sure. So we do have a resource page that will kind of direct you to the basic info you need to know in terms of tenant rights and where you can turn to for legal answers. And then we're always hosting trainings and events and gatherings for people to plug into. We've actually got a training coming up this coming Saturday, and we're hosting a bunch of workshops for how to give public hearing testimony for the Just Cause hearing that's coming up soon. So if people fill out the form on our website that says, do you want to get involved, sign up here, they'll get emails from lots of different ways to get plugged in. Because it's true, I think there are more and more renters who are feeling the crunch of the housing crisis and are looking for something to do about it. And we're really trying to chart a path forward and, do so in a way that is organized and structured and democratic, and where people aren't wasting their time, but they're putting hours into something that's going to really make a difference.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Luke. Melonakos-Harrison, VP of the Connecticut Tenants Union. Thank you very much for sharing some of your time with us this week. We'll try to have you back maybe in early March or mid-March with an update on how the session is moving along.
Great. Thanks as always, John. Appreciate it.
Take care. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Okay, that's how we're going to wrap up this week's program on the Homefront. We're always happy to have you with us. If you go to the WILI Radio YouTube, they have a whole channel with all the programs. We have a playlist. We're always happy to have you with us. And we'll see you next week for another edition. Take care.